Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 21. First of all, I love that this person is calling me Auntie Matrix. Second of all, the person that submitted the story really wants to know everybody's theories on this. So as usual, I'll be tagging them, but make sure that you tell the theories in the comments because they'll be checking. I live in a very small town in South Georgia. Several years ago, my friend needed a ride to a larger city about half an hour south of us. When we were on our way home, we got to a stoplight about 1 to 2 miles away from the turn onto the major highway that would take us home. I remember getting a weird feeling like being stuck. I remember hearing my friend talk but not being able to understand what he was saying. I remember accelerating once the light turned green, driving the 1 to 2 miles to the highway, and then turning onto the highway. The second I turned onto the highway, we were right back at the stoplight 1 to 2 miles back the way we just came. Okay, that's weird. I continued driving. Back down the road. Made the turn onto the highway. Ended up back at the stoplight again. Maybe I was just imagining it. Kept driving and turned onto the highway for a third time. Immediately back at the stoplight. This went on for probably close to an hour. What? Accelerate at the stoplight, drive 1 to 2 miles, turn onto the highway, back at the stoplight. Over and over and over and over. Eventually, I came back or woke up or whatever you want to call it halfway between the stoplight and the highway, and when I turned to the highway, I was finally able to keep going. The whole time, my thoughts were really slow, like they were wading through molasses. I could barely form a coherent thought, and I couldn't speak at all. I was scared to death, thinking I was going to be stuck in a loop forever and that it was never going to end. When I asked my friend about it, he didn't remember anything unusual happening. He didn't remember much at all. I wasn't on drugs or any medication at all. I've never had any mental disorders, but maybe I had a hallucination. I don't know. I would have freaked out. What do you guys think happened? Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 22. This was years ago. I was maybe 19 or 20. I used to live with my dad and I would party a lot, so it wasn't like I was expected home ever, and sometimes I'd go days without seeing him. I got home from a particularly long weekend and was totally spent. It was Tuesday. I felt like I was coming down with an illness or something, and I decided to lay down and take a nap in my room. I remember tossing and turning and kind of waking up at some point, staring at the ceiling and seeing these small black wisps hovering above my head and moving around me. In my sleepy state, it made total sense to me that these were spirits of some sort and they were going to take me away. It should have been scary, but I just accepted it and fell back asleep. Okay, that's just weird in itself. At some point, I wake up again a while later and I hear my best friend at my door talking with my dad, asking if I was home, and I hear him telling her he hasn't seen me and doesn't think I'm there, but he'll let me know that she was looking for me and she leaves. I'm still exhausted, but I finally feel like I'm doing a little better, so I decide to get up and go see my friend. I go to the bathroom and my dad is totally startled to seeing me in the house and asks when I got home. I tell him this morning and he just says I must have been really quiet. I go to charge my phone when it turns out I see it's Thursday night. She got home on Tuesday morning. I can't even believe I must have just slept for 3 days without once getting up to go to the bathroom or drink water or anything. What? I go straight to my friend's house to tell her about this bizarre story, and when I get to her house, she's fast asleep in her room. Once she wakes up, I tell her my whole story and how I heard her talking to my dad earlier, and that's why I decided to finally get up, and she said she never came over looking for me. She swears up and down that she has also been sleeping for an extremely long time and that I was the one who came to visit her earlier. My brain still can't make sense of it. Okay, I need to know, how did she get home? Was she sober when she got home? Because I feel like it's possible that this was somebody slipped something into something. But did it happen to her friend too? Was the friend with her? And how did the dad not notice someone home sleeping for 3 days? I don't know. What do you guys think? Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 23. This was just weird. So it was Thanksgiving 2 years ago, and around 3 a.m. I woke up. It wasn't abruptly, it was just like I naturally woke up. My dog woke up with me, which is common. So I got thirsty, and I went down from my room to the kitchen to get a drink. As I'm walking down the stairs, I see my mom is awake and in the living room, also drinking a glass of water. I get my water and go sit in the living room, and she asks me why I'm up, and I told her I got thirsty. We then hear footsteps coming down the stairs, and it's my brother. Also woke up at 3 a.m. thirsty. He gets his water and comes in the living room. We then hear footsteps again, and it's my youngest brother coming down at 3 a.m. getting a drink. He comes in the living room. Then we hear another set of footsteps, and it's my dad at 3 a.m. getting something to drink. And if that wasn't weird enough, my older sister, who lives 15 to 20 minutes away, texts my mom at 3 a.m. saying how thirsty she was. Later on in the day is when we finally talked about it, and it turns out that my grandma, my mom's mom, also woke up at 3 a.m. thirsty. No one can explain it to this day. My house is very haunted, but not in a bad or negative way, and we don't know if we should sum it up as a huge, massive energy that went through mine, my grandma's, and my sister's houses, or a glitch in the Matrix. It's weird enough that everybody woke up at the same time, but why is everybody thirsty? Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 24. This one gave me the chills. A few years ago, I was 9 months pregnant, 2 days past my due date when I went into labor. We got to the hospital and I labored for hours and hours. They didn't realize the baby was breech, and sadly, from lack of oxygen, my baby was stillborn. I'm so sorry. I was heartbroken and they wheeled me off to the recovery ward while my fiance held my baby boy. The next day I woke up back in my own bed at home. I was still pregnant. It was the same day I went into labor. I turned to my fiance and said, "What happened? How am I back here?" and was crying, saying we've lost the baby. He calmed me down and said I must have had a nightmare and that I hadn't went into labor yet. I was so confused, looked at my hand, and it was still bruised from where my IV went in. I was very freaked out. I knew it wasn't a dream. It was too real. I went into labor again. When I arrived at the hospital, I begged and pleaded with the staff to scan me. They did. My baby was breech. They tried to turn him, but it didn't work. I was rushed off for an emergency C-section and had a healthy baby boy. I just knew someone or something had stopped the heartbreak. My son is nearly 3, and the other day he turned to me randomly and said, "Mom, do you remember when I died in your belly?" What? My heart sank. I questioned him again, but he didn't say anymore. By far the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 25. This story happened a few years ago in October. Me, my sister, and my mom were out on a local walking trail having some girl time. For the main part of the story to make sense, my family has this weird thing where we seem to attract paranormal/matrix event, if you get what I'm saying. Almost every week, someone is saying something weird happened to them. Well, while we're out walking, I had gone a little ahead since I walked faster. I could still hear my sister and my mom, and I occasionally yelled back to them to add to their conversation. I kept walking, and I noticed that I couldn't hear them, so I turned back to see if I had gone too far. The only thing I saw behind me still baffles me to this day. I could see myself standing there as if I was frozen or focused on something and zoned out. What? I saw my mom and my sister walk up behind me, and as my mom put her hand on my shoulder, I was next to them again. I don't know if I would call this an out-of-body experience, but I will say that that moment shook me up for the rest of the week. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 26. This is by far the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. I live in a small rural town. I live in a small rural town in Australia. When I was about 15 to 16, my sister and a bunch of our friends used to play hide and seek around the town at night on weekends. We probably have around 30 shops in the main streets, so it's not an overly big town. We call that manhunt here. Like, hide and seek at night is called manhunt. One night we played for hours and hours, moving towards the outskirts of town where there was an old nuns convent next to the local church. Now, the convent and the church are creepy enough in themselves. Plenty of old tales about residents of the convent being treated in a very bad way. There was one of the beds with chains attached and claw marks on the walls above the bed's heads. Not sure how true, but still eerie. Ooh. Anyway, my sister and the group she was with thought it would be a good idea to go down behind the convent to hide. The group of friends I was with there were seekers. I remember walking down the alleyway, shining the torchlight around, singing out to them, plain as day, and we could not see anyone in sight of us. We sang out for a good 20 minutes and nothing. So we ended up walking back down the main street and going back to my place. No one would answer their phones, and we assumed my sister and her friends had taken off on us. They were older, so it was common for her to do that. By the time it was just me and my good friend, we walked straight home. When I got home, my sister and mom were sitting at the dining table asking where we were for 5 hours into the night, and why were we pretending not to see them standing in the middle of the alley waving at us. Apparently we walked straight past or through them. Still to this day, she doesn't believe me that I swear on the life of me we didn't see them. She had no missed calls on her phone from me or anything. There was no one in the alleyway, and we came straight home. This plays in my mind a lot, and I don't know whether it was a glitch in the Matrix, but it's some crazy stuff, and I haven't been out near the convent since. I'm now 26. This is why I do not play manhunts. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 27. This just happened a few weeks ago. My mom and I had just gotten home from a grocery store trip. She went inside the house to use the bathroom, and I stayed outside sorting the groceries and bringing them in. For some context, my house doesn't have a driveway. We have a back of the house where we park, etc., and we have an electrical gate. Anyway, as I was preparing to take more groceries inside the house, I heard my brother's whistle outside the gate. He whistles at the dogs to let them know he's coming to visit. I heard his car, and since he doesn't live with us, he peeked through the crack of the gate and asked me to open it for him. I told him I thought that was you since the dogs are wagging their tail. I then turned and pushed the button for the gate to open, and as I waited for him to drive in, there was such an eerie feeling and my dogs started barking aggressively. I put them inside the house and walked over to the gate only to find that no one was there. I quickly called my brother, and he told me that he was at his house, which is about 90 miles from where I live. I told him that wasn't possible and that I had just seen him and he was even whistling at the dogs. He told me that before the phone call, he was outside playing with his own dogs and whistling at them. I'm not sure what happened, and I can't even understand it, but it was real and it wasn't my imagination. Always listen to your dogs! Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 28. This happened years ago, and I still think about it to this day. When I was 14, my mom and I were living in this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. She had just left for work, and I was about to leave for a ski trip with one of my friends and their families. This farmhouse had a driveway that was about 200 meters long, and I don't know how long that is because I'm in the US. How many feet is a meter? Alexa, how many feet is 200 meters?
200 meters house is about 660 feet.
660 feet. Okay, that's really far. This farmhouse had a driveway that was about 200 meters long due to the winter in Canada. It meant that we were always parking at the very end of the driveway right by the road and would have to walk up to the house. Backstory on the house. Now, this farmhouse has been in my family for generations, and there's a room in the house that was locked up and no one was allowed to go inside. I don't like that. It reminds me of the skeleton key. It always creeped me out as it was right across the hallway from my bedroom. I had heard stories about family member who had passed away, but I wasn't given any more information on what happened, where it happened, etc., but I always thought the place was haunted. My friend and her family showed up at my house and were waiting for me to get ready. I saw that they parked at the end of the driveway by the street and had walked up to the house and were about to pick up all my stuff and pack it into the car. I turned around to grab my bag and suddenly I was back upstairs in the bathroom in the shower, which is what I was doing right before my friend showed up. I was really confused, so I hopped out of the shower quickly, put on some clothes, and looked out the window to see that my friend's car was not at the end of my driveway. It was right up in front of my house. With the amount of snow, there was no way that this car could have gotten up the driveway. So I go downstairs and I open the front door. The car was back at the end of the driveway. I walk outside and I can see in the snow that there were tracks of a car being parked right out front. There were tracks of the car driving up the driveway along with footsteps from my friend and her family members when they had come to the door when I saw them earlier. I walk all the way to the car to see that all of my stuff is already packed in the car. I turn around to look back and none of the tracks were there from the car or from them, and it's just my footprints that I see. I never said anything to anyone because I thought I was going crazy, but to this day, this still scares me. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 29. Okay, so this has to be the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. I was about 7 to 8 years old. I lived in a 3-story home with my mom, dad, dog, and twin sister. At this time, we had friends over for the night. It was my friend Madison and Summerlin. Our dads were close friends and decided to go to a bar that night and have some fun while we stayed home with my mom. So it was just my sister, mom, Madison, Summerlin, our dog Jessie. My mother always went to bed around 9, 10 at night, and my sister, our friends, and me stayed up late that night. Eventually, my sister and Summerlin went to bed, and Madison and me were still awake. At around 1 a.m., we heard my dog barking. At first, it freaked us out, but then we realized, oh crap, it's going to wake everyone up. Let's go get him. So everyone's bedrooms were on the second floor. At this time, Jessie, our dog, was downstairs barking. Madison and me walked out the bedroom to go down the front staircase, which is right in front of my parents' bedroom at the time. As we were walking to get Jessie, my dad walks out of the bedroom. It's dark, so at first he's walking out of his bedroom door. It scared me a little bit. But then I look at him and he's pale as snow, dressed in casual everyday clothes, and even has his shoes on. To explain more, when he left for the bar, he was dressed in completely different clothes and shoes. Again, it's 1 a.m. I told my dad, hey, Jessie is barking. He looked at me and said, who's Jessie? I looked back at him and told him, our dog Jessie, Dad. He looks at me again and says, who's Jessie? At this point, I'm scared out of my mind because he's just standing there staring at me with a straight face, not even moving. I start to wonder, why does he have all of his clothes on, and why is he pale, and why is he asking me who our dog is? So as I turn around to look at Madison, she's not even there. She ran off because she was so scared, so I darted back into my bedroom to find her in the bed also freaking out. Anyway, we go to bed kind of scared and wake up the next day. I go to my dad and ask him if he remembered last night at 1 a.m. and why he said he didn't know who Jessie was, and he looked at me and said, I wasn't even home at 1 a.m. I was still at the bar. I swear to this day it freaks me out because who was I talking to? Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 30. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, my class went on a field trip to San Francisco. My school didn't use school buses, but instead had parents drive. My mom was driving on this trip and we had about 8 kids in the car. We were in standstill traffic, so we were playing a game when all of a sudden we heard the loudest high-pitched noise ever. It wasn't from the car, and it didn't sound like it could have possibly been from any other car. We all looked around outside to see if anyone else on the freeway had heard the noise. All of the cars were gone, and it was just us on the freeway. What? This is weird. In a matter of seconds, the noise happened again, and then all of the cars reappeared. It all happened so fast, and I was so young, but that has always scared me. Me and my mom and some of those kids in the car still talk about it, trying to figure out what might have happened. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 31. I had to travel to a city that I didn't know. So what happened was that I traveled there with a friend, an older lady, let's call her Mrs. X, to meet a friend, let's call him M. They were making a music festival and we were going to be part of it. My friend M was going to get us to the bus station. It was a 3-hour trip from our city, so with Mrs. X, we read and talked and slept. She was fine the whole day, but when we got into the city, she started to feel odd, she was dizzy, so we thought maybe her pressure was falling or something. So as soon as we arrived at the bus station, we saw our friend M that took her to the hospital. He didn't acknowledge me, but I thought that was because he was worried about Mrs. X. So they took a cab and went to the hospital. I was left there completely ignored. I really didn't think much of it because I thought he was going to come back. I was with my guitar, so I thought I wasn't allowed in the cab because it was too crowded. So I started asking around people to let me know where the hospital was so that I could get there. Nobody answered me. I remember clearly touching my chest and watching my hands because I felt invisible. But then I thought everyone was just rude there. So I finally figured out where the hospital was. Mind you, this happened around 17 years ago, so no smartphones, no maps. and started walking. The city was small, so the hospital wasn't far. I see my friend M walking to where I was, and I joke about how invisible I am, but as soon as I started talking, I'm right in front of him, and he's talking to himself. My name here didn't come. What are we gonna do? She has the guitar. And I yelled, I'm right here, M. He was seeing right through me as if I was a ghost. I started to panic like never before. Until today, I've never panicked like that. So he takes out his Nokia to call me. Nokia. I had a Nokia, mine was blue. I thought it was so cool. So he takes out his Nokia to call me, and I see right in front of me how he gets frustrated because the call didn't go through. What? I check my phone and it never received a call. So we start yelling to go to the hospital. It's like he hears something because he says, maybe she's already at the hospital with Mrs. X. So he turns around and I follow. I was very careful not to be tempted to walk through something. Really, I was still panicking. As soon as we put a foot in the hospital, he turns around and looks at me and says, there you are, where were you? And I was like, dude, and I tell him everything. He never saw me. Next day, I learned that this city is called the City of Witches. I would have freaked out if someone couldn't see me. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 32. This happened 2 years ago and it still haunts me. I live in a snowy, sleepy town in the northern part of America. An average winter brings a little over 100 inches and the road conditions are always spotty. Plows run by one right after the other and black ice is so common that it's just assumed that it's what your car is skating on. That day looked much the same as described. I was driving home from work later than normal that evening and was late to pick up the kids from my parents. I had just hung up from my mother and let her know that it was 4:21 and I would probably be another 15 minutes. I was on a long stretch of thruway that's surrounded by forest, and due to poor weather conditions, there wasn't many adventurous travelers on the road. In that moment, there was a red car in front of me and a semi traveling in the opposite direction, and they were my only companions. After a few minutes of navigating the road, I looked at the clock and it was 4:26. I was thinking of calling my mother again to let her know about how bad the roads were. The red car in front spun about and in line of the semi. It must have slipped on black ice and the semi reacted to avoid the collision. The bed of the semi didn't follow the truck and all of a sudden it was in my path with nowhere for me to go. It was sliding on ice and there was no braking and nowhere to turn off to. I shut my eyes and I braced for the impact. That never came. It felt like my heart took an extra second to start beating again, and I opened my eyes to be traveling down that stretch of thruway with no red car in sight. And the semi truck had passed me moments after. I called my mother to tell her the crazy thing that just happened, and she told me that she just hung up from me a couple of seconds ago. I looked back at the clock and it was 4:21. Oh, that glitch saved her life! Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 33. I survived a car accident when I was 16, but it wasn't until almost 10 years later that I would find out the details of my accident aren't as I remembered. I had just gotten my license, and back in the early 2000s, you only had your temps for 6 months. I had never driven during the winter months, let alone the snow. I got ready for school, and I decided to take my older sister's Jeep that day since she had okayed me driving it while she was out of town. As I walked outside, there was a layer of ice and light snow. I left my house and was a mile or so down a country road. The speed limit was 55 miles an hour, and I was going about 5 over. Being the inexperienced driver, I was trying to pull on a winter glove on my hand while driving. For a split second, I let the wheel go and my tire caught the edge of the rough country road. By the time I had the wheel, I already had smashed through the first 2 mailboxes I would hit. I overcompensated. Throwing the wheel hard to the left caused me to do a complete 180 while simultaneously rolling the Jeep Cherokee into a ditch nose first. The airbag didn't deploy in time and I still can see the scar on my left eyebrow from hitting my face on the wheel. I was lucky to have my seatbelt on, otherwise I would have been ejected through the windshield. Now this is the most important part. The car landed on its right side, doors completely down on one side and doors on the other side facing the sky. I quickly unbuckled and fell to the other side of the car. Grabbing my phone, I called my dad. I just wanted out of the car as fast as possible. The windshield was still intact and I couldn't open the back hatch. I then tried to open the doors facing the sky. I'm 5 feet tall and I could barely reach the handle. I finally was able to pull the handle, but the door was so heavy I couldn't get it open. Then, out of nowhere, the door I'm trying to open opens to the sky. A man reaches in, grabs both my arms, and pulls me from the car. My body scraped across the door opening and left bruises that I would have for weeks. As I stood on top of the turned over Jeep, I see 2 teachers from my school parking and getting out of their car. They run over and help me down off the car and into theirs. Within seconds, my dad and the ambulances arrive. This is where it gets interesting. Fast forward almost 10 years later, I was at a wedding with tons of people from my hometown. I ran into one of the teachers and the story of my terrible accident is brought up while I'm standing around the bar. I added in pieces and parts, but specifically the part about the man that pulled me from the car. At that moment, the teacher's eyes bug out of their head and they said, "What are you talking about? No one else was there. It was just you standing on top of the car when we pulled up." I know this person existed. My mom and I talked in depth that week about sending this man a thank you or a gift. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I absolutely believe in this universe. Someone or something pulled me from that Jeep. My height and the sheer weight of that door would have been impossible for me to exit the vehicle on my own. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 34. Oh my god, this one is good. As long, I gotta talk fast. So this one happened in 2013. I was 22 finishing university and it's common to still live with my family if you study in your hometown. I At uni, I had this best friend, and a few weeks before she moved out of her house near campus, someone robbed the place. I immediately told her to get her bag and come stay with me. We couldn't sleep in my room single bed, and my mom was painting hers with a double bed, so my mom slept in mine and we slept in the living room couches. Not ideal, but fine. Couches were forming an L and we slept head to head. We didn't do anything the night before, just slept. No alcohol or movies or anything. Anyway, in the morning, I open my eyes to the normal house noises and see my BFF dressed in jeans and a caramel top with a huge brown stain on it. She's a perfectionist and wouldn't wear anything stained, so I got curious and looked more closely at her touching up on her hair in the hallway mirror, acting almost too happy. She was just robbed and never a morning person. She looked weird, like older and colder inside. It was so weird. I sat up some more to see her wink at me in the reflection. I spent all day every day with that girl for 4 years and she physically couldn't wink. Couldn't synchronize or something. It always looked like she was blinking. That was a perfect wink. I asked, "What's up? Where are you going?" trying to start a conversation. She didn't reply and just turned to look at me and jiggled my house keys in her hand. She smirked and walked to the door, but not in a normal way. She was acting as if I wasn't there talking to her and she was sneaking out and didn't want to be seen or heard. As the door was closing behind her, she gave me a weird look from the crack of the door. I thought she was being super weird and I got up to make coffee. We had an open floor kitchen living room setup, so I was practically still right there. I made my coffee and turned around to some just woke up sound. It was my BFF. What? She was there, freshly woken, sitting up, asking if I could make her coffee too, stretching in the pajamas I had lent her. I almost screamed. Oh my God, I would have too. Both her and my mom were worried when I told them, but thought I was dreaming till my mom tested the door. Since it's just her and I living there, she's the one to double lock all 3 doors and everything and double check again later. She had locked and checked last night. The door was fully unlocked and my keys were outside, dropped on the mat. My keychain and all. It was my keychain as it was custom made of presents. My mom insisted I must have dropped them without noticing or something, but she had opened the door for us, so I hadn't taken them out of my jacket pocket at all. We let it slide for some reason. She left the keys on the kitchen aisle so I'd not forget them going out. Anyway, my BFF and I got ready and she put on the caramel top she was wearing earlier. No stain. I was creeped out, but okay. Going for my jacket in the other room, I heard O's and stuff and come back to see my mom and my BFF trying to wipe off a coffee stain on my friend's top. The stain. This was getting creepy. Decided I was paranoid though. Put on my jacket and something jinked. My keys were there in my pocket where I always left them. But my keys were also on the aisle in front of me. I pulled them out and set the 2 next to each other. Same keys, same keychain. We were all freaking out. What the hell happened that morning? All these years and she and I are still wondering. There was no girl in my building looking like her to say found my keys and got in and I confused them in my sleep haze. My mom had locked the door. How did I end up with 2 sets of keys? Who the hell winked at me in the mirror? This one really freaked me out. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 35. So a few years ago, I was homesick by myself. I saw my mom's car pull down the driveway, so I went downstairs to go see her. When she came in, she was saying hi to our dog and shut the door. I went to go say hi to her and give her a hug. I even took her lunchbox and water bottle and set them on the counter for her while she was in the mud room, the room that our side door goes into. I left to go sit in the living room. After a few minutes, I didn't hear her anymore, and I never saw her come into the main room. I got up to go find her, but her lunchbox and water bottle were gone from the counter. When I opened the side door that goes to the garage door was closed, and her car was gone, and my dog was upstairs, but I never heard or saw him go back upstairs. There's a big window that sees out to our front yard. That's right when you turn out of the hallway that leads to the mudroom. So when I left the hallway, I looked out the window and saw my mom's car pulling down the driveway. This is a true glitch, and it happened to my mom when she was a kid. Mind you, my mother is one of the most logical people I know. She doesn't believe in anything supernatural. She grew up by the water in SoCal. She would walk around with her dog by herself. Times were different, and 6-year-olds could roam the suburbs. This must have been in the mid-60s. She was on a walk, and all of a sudden, the streets and the houses looked different. All the cars were from the 30s. A man rushed outside the house dressed in unfamiliar clothes and said, "You're not supposed to be here." And then all of a sudden, she was back and had no idea where she went. Some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 36. This is another crazy story about someone being saved from a car accident. This happened many years ago when I lived in New Hampshire. My husband, now ex, our 2 young kids and myself had gone on a day trip. It had started to rain and it cut our day trip short. We headed home and I was driving. This part is weird because I never drove when my husband was with me and I don't know why I was driving this day. We were having a great time singing and joking around with the kids and enjoying the drive when suddenly, as we were coming down a steep hill, a car pulled out in front of us and the rain-drenched road kept me from being able to stop and we barreled into the other car. The crash was horrific. I was the only one who survived. As I screamed and cried trying to get my children, everything stopped me and I was being pulled backwards in time. I watched as we reversed out of the wreck and back up to the top of the hill. At the top of the hill, we started moving forward again, but this time there was an arrow on the ground showing me the route to take to miss the car and to get back over before a large truck topped the hill coming from the other direction. Time once again stopped. We reversed backward up the hill. I felt myself snap back into my body and we were once again on the top of the hill. I said out loud, "Holy shit, hold on." Holy shit is right. My husband looked at me weird because there was no clear and present danger that he saw. I took the route just as it showed me in my second vision, just missing both the car that did in fact pull out in front of us, as well as the truck that topped the hill just as we got back to the correct lane. My husband looked at me again and said, "How did you know that that car was going to pull out in front of us?" I just said I had a vision. Never before or since that day have I had a vision. Thank God you did then. Here's some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 37. Okay, I thought this was going one way and it went a different way. Just listen. I lived in a street where if you were to leave the driveway, take a left about 500 meters down the road would be a gas station on the right, and next to the gas station was a bridge that led over train tracks. I was 7 months pregnant with my son, and one particular day I had been feeling extremely sick. I had been laying in bed when I felt myself start to drift off. I was awoken 2 hours later by my partner as he come to tell me to get ready for my ultrasound appointment. I had the feeling like I was living a real-life fever dream and still felt nauseous, but I had to go to my appointment. I got into the car and my partner pulled out of the driveway. He took a left, and as we were driving, I saw the bridge getting closer, but the gas station wasn't next to the bridge anymore, and instead of it being train tracks underneath the bridge, it was a river. Confused and scared, I asked my partner what happened to the gas station and where the train tracks were. He looked at me as if I were crazy and told me there had never been a gas station or train tracks. It was just a patch of overgrown grass where the gas station was. I know I never imagined a gas station because the house I lived in was my childhood home, and I have vivid memories of my parents sending me there to get myself snacks. I also remember being a child and standing on that bridge watching trains pass underneath me. Come time to get my ultrasound, the sonographer asked me to confirm my due date. I tell her 12th of September, and she gives me the same look my partner gave me when I asked about the gas station bridge. My partner tells her my correct due date, which is the 19th of November, which technically only makes me 5 months pregnant. She then proceeds to ask if I'll be finding out the baby's gender at this appointment. I tell her I already know it's a boy, and she asks if I've already had an appointment to confirm. I tell her yes, and she checks my file. The last ultrasound appointment I had on her files was from when I was 12 weeks, so there should be almost no chance I would know the gender. Still extremely confused about everything, she tells me my baby is actually a girl. From there, things get blurry and I feel lightheaded. I don't remember much after that, but my partner continuously asking if I'm okay in the car ride home. I'm currently 8 months pregnant now. Strangely, a new gas station is being built where I was so confident the last one was, but my partner, parents, siblings, and everyone I've asked has no memory of the gas station or the train tracks. My sense of reality has been messed up since, and I strongly believe I switched realities. This is so crazy. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 38. When I was 28, I had just showered upstairs, gotten out, dried, dressed, and did my hair. I looked in on my toddler drawing a wonky circle on her chalkboard in her room and then went downstairs to make coffee. One of my cats was meowing at me for food. He headbutted my leg twice in different spots and my foot once while I got his food ready. As I put it on the bench, I heard a loud bang from upstairs. I turned to run thinking my toddler had hurt herself. I saw my cat was in the air midway through jumping onto the bench. I bolted up the stairs and all of a sudden I was back in the shower turning the water off. I stood there extremely confused, but I got out and did the same exact thing, including checking on my toddler. She was drawing the exact same thing, a wonky circle, and was at the exact same point. I went downstairs and walked into my kitchen. My cat was still in the air midway through his jump, food untouched in his bowl. What? I blinked and all of a sudden I was at the bench, no food bowl in sight, and my cat was at my feet meowing. He headed my leg twice in the same spots and then my foot. I stood there thinking, what the fuck, did his food, heard a bang, turned to run, and saw him jump up again and ran upstairs and checked on my toddler. Nothing was out of place. I scooped her up and carried her with her chalkboard and chalk downstairs, walked past the kitchen, glanced in, and there was my cat still in the air, midway through his jump, food still untouched. I feel like the story just stops, but then like what happened after that? Was the cat just literally suspended in the air? What? Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 39. In 2002, I got a divorce and moved myself and my 2 children into a small apartment in a 2-plex apartment building. 2 apartments upstairs and 2 down. There were 4 of these 4-plexes on the block, but mine was the white on the outside and the others were tan. We occupied the top left-hand apartment, and directly across the hall was a trusted friend of mine's apartment. I asked my friend from the apartment across the hall to watch my kids for me while I went to the grocery store, as my kids were 2 and 4 at the time, and shopping with toddlers can be difficult. LOL. When I got back, I pulled up directly in front of my building, the white one, and I saw my 4-year-old son waving at me from my apartment window. I waved back and grabbed the bags and went inside. I climbed the stairs, opened my door, and immediately realized I was in the wrong apartment. Now remember, there are only 2 apartments on this floor and they're parallel across from each other. There's no way I could have walked into a different one, as there's only 1 apartment on that floor that is on that side of the building. The furniture wasn't mine. It smelled like men's cologne. There was a big area rug on the floor that wasn't mine. It was not my apartment. I shut the door and grabbed my bags and went back to my car, thinking I walked into the wrong building since I had only lived there for a few weeks at this point. But no, I sat back in my car and saw my son again in the window of that building, in the window that would be my living room. I ran back in without my groceries this time and flung the door open thinking I had to save my children. But when I opened the same door I had just wrongfully entered, it was now my apartment. What? I was totally confused and must have looked terrified or something because my friend asked if something was wrong. I told her I didn't know what happened and I started to tell her about entering the wrong apartment, but she cut me off and asked why I was sitting in my car for so long. She said they saw me pull up, my son waved from the window, and then they watched me sit with my hands on the steering wheel for about 5 solid minutes staring straight ahead. Then they saw me run out of my car towards the building without groceries, and she thought something bad had happened because I looked panicked. I tried to tell her that I thought I went in the wrong apartment, but she said I just sat in my car motionless. I still don't know what happened. Oh. Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories, part 40. This one made me feel weird. I had been seeing a guy for a couple of weeks. We decided to go for a day hike in Joshua Tree National Park. We met in town at a Denny's and took my car into the park. We started late in the day. By the time we completed the short looping trail and were back to the parking area, it was dusk. We found a nice spot 150 yards south of the car tops to wait for the stars to come out. We can see the car in the light of the outhouse in the parking area. A couple of hours go by and it was very dark. Then to the south of us, 3 lights can be seen about half a mile away. They moved as if they were hikers walking with headlamps, something very common out there. But even after 30 minutes, they didn't seem to get any closer. The temperature started dropping, so it was time to go, and we began to walk to the car, which again we can see with our eyes. Walking 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes of walking with no progress towards the car. We stopped to confirm with each other that we have noticed something weird is happening. We should be at the car already. So now we really hurry and walk with our eyes locked on the car. It was like we were on a treadmill. We're passing boulders and foliage, but we're not getting anywhere. The hikers behind us are at the same distance too. Another 5 minutes of walking quickly and we are no closer. Again, we stop to reassess the bizarre situation we are in. We figure we were walking at 4 miles an hour. We should have covered a mile of ground. And the car is still right there about a football field and a half away. What? He decides we're going to run. I agree. Run, girl. He grabs my hand and we run as fast as we can. Almost when I can't run anymore, we finally see the car getting closer. Felt like the sensation called ground rush that skydivers have when at a certain altitude, the ground rushes at you. We get in and speed out of the park. We didn't say a word during the drive back to Denny's. When we finally started to talk again, all we could say over and over was, what the hell was that? I don't know. We lost 3 hours of time. I don't know if those other hikers were experiencing the same thing as us and we never called each other again. 2 years later, he messaged me this lone sentence. Do you think that was aliens? I replied, I don't know.